This story today completely overshadows all the recent controversies related to the peace plan that is likely being formulated and to which Ukraine is arguably being pressured to accept. This morning, a story emerged and continues to unfold, unfortunately not in the most favorable light for certain individuals tasked with leading negotiations on behalf of the United States with Moscow. This situation is still very much developing, casting a shadow on those involved. Vitkoff, indeed, who has recently become completely compromised, has now made headlines across numerous European publications. Specifically, Bloomberg published a comprehensive transcript of the conversations between Vitkoff and Yuri Ushakov, who effectively serves as Putin's assistant, actively participating in various negotiation tracks and discussions. This is a massive publication which some have already speculated could be artificial intelligence generated, even though the evidence currently points to the contrary. Ushakov himself corroborated the discussions between him and Vitkoff, stating that their communication occurs with considerable frequency. And Ushakov even specified the particular social network, the messenger, through which this significant leak is believed to have taken place. It's the WhatsApp messenger. Why did Ushakov specifically name WhatsApp? To show Russians that it's a supposedly dangerous platform, so everyone should quickly switch to Messenger Max and stay there and communicate, not to use WhatsApp. However, if we are to believe Ushakov, it is now known that WhatsApp is being utilized in the Kremlin for discussions with Americans. So, a leak through WASAP is essentially a jab at the Americans, or possibly Great Britain, whose intelligence services might have access to certain algorithms in that messenger, as the Russians believe. But again, that's not entirely certain. So essentially, what exactly is transpiring on these tapes? The conversation between Yuri Ushakov and Stevie Vitkoff primarily centers on the preparations for an upcoming discussion between Donald Trump and the Russian president. And this particular dialogue, in essence, is being conceptualized and presented by Vitkoff, suggesting how it might ideally progress in the fullest sense of the expression. Vitkoff advises Ushakov, expressing his profound respect for the Russian Federation and all its accomplishments, and then requests Ushakov to arrange for Putin to commend Trump for the triumphant resolution in Gaza, facilitated by the 20-point peace plan. This, he hopes, could serve as an auspicious beginning for further discussions concerning, specifically on the Ukrainian questions. So following the Gaza analogy, another 20 points could potentially be established. And there could be certain points. And now, about those points. Look, Stevie Vitkoff. Yes, listen to what I'm telling you. I just want you to tell President Putin to convey to President Trump, you know, Stevie and Yuri talked about a very similar 20-point peace plan, and perhaps this is something that we believe could advance the situation somewhat. We Russians are quite open to such things, to exploring what it truly takes to forge a peace agreement. We Russians are quite open
now,
to
between
such
us,
things,
I
to
understand
exploring
what
what
it
it truly
required to
takes to
achieve a
forge a
peace
peace
agreement.
agreement. Donetsk, this is Vitkoff speaking, and maybe a territory swap somewhere. But I'll say, instead of putting it that way, let's be more optimistic. I believe we'll reach a deal. And I believe, Yuri, that President Trump will afford me considerable latitude and autonomy to successfully finalize this agreement. This would be a normal conversation, a typical exchange between officials, even on the designated channel they use for communication. It becomes clear that Vitkoff is not just an ordinary person. He is someone who, if you didn't know him, you might assume he's had a Russian passport for a very long time. I don't believe Vitkoff actually possesses a Russian passport, but his deep Russian roots are undeniable. And I will now explain to you why this situation is perilous and why Vitkoff has become so profoundly implicated. There's been a furious reaction from congressmen and from senators. The lower house, indeed everyone globally, is expressing their opinions on this matter. Here, for example, I'll show you a screenshot. This is Bacon's posts. Yes, Republican Congressman Don Bacon specifically declares that. And let's continue reading from there. According to his statements, Vitkoff conducts himself as if he were on the payroll of the Russian Federation. Bacon labels the unfolding events as a farce and a blemish on the United States of America, strongly asserting that the individual in question should be dismissed from his position. He should be fired. Do you understand this whole story now? Next, this isn't the only post circulating about this matter, is it? And then there's Fitzpatrick, another Republican, folks. I'm presenting this to you now. The second-ranking Republican, an influential politician named Brian Fitzpatrick, explicitly states that this is a significant problem and demonstrates precisely why these clumsy sideshows and covert discussions must end immediately. No more clandestine meetings, and he further states, allow Secretary of State Marco Rubio to carry out his responsibilities honestly and objectively. Return everything to its previous state. This alludes to Vitkoff's summer trip to Moscow, where he neglected to bring a stenographer, and it remains unknown what agreements he and Putin reached, with only Vitkoff's account to rely on, that is, if you choose to believe him, correct? Fitzpatrick clearly doesn't believe it. Another member of the House of Representatives, Ted Lieu, asserts that Vitkoff's actions are simply beyond comprehension and truly inconceivable. And he states that Vitkoff is truly a real traitor, a genuine betrayer of his country, and that Stevie Vitkoff should be working for the United States, not the Russian Federation. Firstly, Vitkoff absolutely must resign, but moving beyond that, there's quite an interesting story unfolding about how the press is continuing to react to this entire situation. All right, we've certainly listened to the political statements. Now let's consider the statements and reactions that have emerged in response to this report and the relationships it unveils, shall we? This photo, by the way, is quite telling in this scandal. All the principal figures are present. There's Vitkoff on the right. The somewhat out-of-focus individual in the middle is Ushakov, from whom the conversation was leaked, and naturally, Putin. This occurred during one of Vitkoff's many visits to Russia, as the subsequent information you'll uncover reveals a rather significant development. So, the Western press's reaction to this is as follows. I'll just mention the most renowned journalists you've likely encountered, such as Christo Grozev from The Insider. Vitkoff advises a foreign leader on how to manipulate his own president. I wonder if Trump will now demand charges of treason against Vitkoff. Well, that's a pretty keen assessment, wouldn't you say? Burkhardt, a Politico journalist whose writings you undoubtedly follow and whose voice you likely recognize, asserts, it is tempting to presume that U.S. intelligence intentionally leaked this material to bring to light Vitkoff's manipulations. You see, there's even a theory here. I haven't even delved into the authenticity of these materials yet. And then the question arises, who leaked them and for what purpose? Politico believes it could be US intelligence leaking this to simply compromise Vitkoff. Him. Next, here's another journalist, Christopher Miller from the Financial Times, saying, an incredible story unfolds. This is shocking, even for those accustomed to Vitkoff. Here, he directly advises Russian officials on how Putin should approach Trump, yet displays a striking, fundamental misunderstanding of Putin's aims and the war itself. There you have it. And finally, from the Washington Post, John Hudson says, if you're Ushakov, you're probably a little concerned about your communication security. Indeed, there's a touch of irony in that. However, what truly captivates me is a significant publication that has just been released today. A Norwegian journalist named Ingebakk Iversen. Ingebakk Iversen offers a comprehensive historical deep dive into Vitkoff's persona, exploring his identity and origins. She then states, he's not just some MAGA guy, make America great again, MAGA, who consults with Trump on matters related to Russia and Ukraine. Vitkoff is of Russian descent, built his fortune in New York circles filled with post-Soviet criminal money, and is now pushing a so-called peace plan that is the Kremlin's wish list. This isn't just accidental, it's a very clear logical link. The FBI testified to Congress about this era. It wasn't a secret. Who exactly came to power back then? Stevie Vitkoff and Donald Trump. Then, delving into the 80s and 90s, she meticulously describes how Trump's friend Vitkoff actively engaged in the commercial version of the very same ecosystem that Donald Trump was exploiting for his own significant financial gains. While Trump busied himself with condominiums acquired through cash transactions, Vitkoff immersed himself in significant office building ventures funded via opaque partnerships and distressed sellers. Two individuals, a single conduit for Russian influence. These two men are a single conduit for Russian influence. All of this, dear friends, is unfolding as per the opinion of this Norwegian journalist. Then she goes back to 2004-2005 and says, Vitkoff is Trump's main representative on Russia and Ukraine policy. And this is not by chance either. He possesses no diplomatic background, lacks experience within Ukraine, has extensive Russian connections, and a track record of prominent pro-Kremlin declarations. And so here we are once more with the United States fulfilling Russia's wishes. So the ultimate conclusion remains, are these individuals indeed Russian agents? So the Russian fabrication is not really a fabrication. That's a globally incorrect interpretation. Are they Russian agents? Most likely not. Vitkoff is certainly not to be considered a Russian agent. I agree with that statement as well. But are they carriers of Russian policy with a history in that network? And here's the answer, 1000%. These individuals' worldview, networks, and financing were shaped by Russian influence. The real question isn't if he's compromised. It's why U.S. policy concerning Russia is being molded by an individual whose worldview was cultivated within the only American industry that Russian intelligence has consistently infiltrated for decades, as concluded by Norwegian journalist Ine Bakke Iversen, a researcher specializing in autobiography and biography. Specifically, not the autobiography of Stevie Vitkoff. It's an exceptionally interesting piece that illuminates many aspects, yet it's hardly a secret. There's also another American publicist, and incidentally, his work has been translated into Ukrainian. If you want, you can find it online. His name is Seth Abramson. He is a lawyer, an attorney, and a publicist who authored, you might say, an OSINT-like piece. In 2016, he penned a significant work titled How Trump Betrayed America, which documented the betrayal or proof of collusion, as it was called. And all these episodes from the 80s and 90s are in there. Furthermore, the entire work is fundamentally constructed through an analysis of Donald Trump's own publications and interviews. Who said what, where, and when? This book became a bestseller in America and worldwide, and it's available in Ukrainian translation. And this is absolutely not a promotional advertisement. If you wish, you can seek out Ine Bakke Iversen's article and her various publications specifically concerning Vitkoff himself. And now, even more facts from Bloomberg. The truth is, it wasn't just a single phone conversation. Ushakov himself confirms this. Vitkoff also engaged in other interesting contacts. Bloomberg is delving into this topic today, presenting this material. Dmitriev orchestrated for Vitkoff to present the so-called Russian peace plan as if it were his own creation. This is what Bloomberg reports. Which in essence is what many people are anticipating confirmation of. That this narrative, featuring conditions that many describe as capitulation, though I personally don't see it that way, rather as exceedingly unfavorable peace proposals, could not possibly have originated from the United States of America. And things escalated significantly because it's not just Vitkoff who should resign. It's quite possible that his close friend Donald Trump also needs to step down. Donald Trump, I will remind you repeatedly, he's not one of those easily scared individuals. Numerous times. He was already teetering on the brink of impeachment during his initial presidency. Now, in his second term, he might face impeachment once more, especially after the full contents of the Epstein files are unveiled and comprehensively understood. I'll remind you that this whole Epstein-Gate story is ongoing. And now, this story is tied to the trafficking of young women and indeed human beings. And now we have this whole narrative of insinuations connected to a peace plan that in fact originated not with Vitkoff, but rather with Dmitriev himself. And it's all because of Vitkoff's business in the Russian Federation. Decades-long business, 30, 40 years, however many years you want. So then, could impeachment be a possibility? Is Trump now apprehensive of such a reaction from Congress, specifically from the Republicans, or not at all? Well, let me tell you something. If you happen to watch the video then, where Donald Trump essentially offers commentary on the situation, explicitly addressing his perspective on this specific issue, you know. That he was compelled to address, so please, the subtitles are right there. Take a look.
And Bloomberg has
See? Quite calm. He says, He's just doing his job. He hammers out deals. He's simply a businessman. He's always on the lookout for opportunities to essentially sell out Ukraine, to phrase it rather bluntly. So Trump is incredibly placid. Perhaps he took some tranquilizers or something. It's unclear. Nevertheless, he appears to be completely at ease. So, the key question now is this. Regardless of how this situation develops, what exactly should Ukraine do in response to all of this? In this mess, I know about the Medish and Vitkoff tapes. Well, I'll put it this way. Could this potentially be an opportunity for Ukraine to enhance its negotiation stance? Absolutely it is. Can Ukraine leverage this scandal, particularly the Vitkoff tapes, to its advantage? It is capable. Should Ukraine leverage this scandal to its advantage? It should. Has Ukraine begun to make moves towards applying pressure on these very unreliable individuals who are engaged in handling a negotiation process from the US side? It does. That's because Mr. Betts, a presidential office official who journeyed to Abu Dhabi, has had his social media posts widely read, detailing the sequence of events that transpired there. He declared today that there are certain absolute Ukrainian red lines that cannot be crossed, and these are non-negotiable. And this is transpiring precisely within the framework of what Vitkoff, together with Dmitriev and Ushakov, drafted in that so-called peace plan, as has now become evident. So here are the absolute 3 red lines. Absolutely no changes to the constitution, 0 territorial concessions, and no restrictions whatsoever on joining NATO, other defense alliances, or on procuring weapons. In your view, is Ukraine handling things correctly? Do share your thoughts in the comments section. This is a very, very, very complex situation that Trump is essentially trying to shirk responsibility for, if you'll excuse the expression. However, the crucial question remains, will he genuinely succeed in doing so?